Okay, so far what we have done is three APIs, right? So appointments API, doctors API, and patients API. And then if you remember, we were always using the H2 database, which is an in-memory database. This is supposed to be used only for development purposes, and it is not to be used, you know, in the production environment. So in production environment, we need an actual database, and we were moving in towards direction where we were evolving our APIs to an extent that they were becoming mature, and now it is real. Now is the time to add a database layer, an actual database layer, where the information about all these things, patient appointments, everything will go and get saved. Okay, so that is the goal. So from now onwards, we will not be using H2 database, and we will be using something called as MongoDB. Now there's a difference between how an H2 database looks like and how a MongoDB is structured. So MongoDB falls into a specialized database category called as NoSQL database. Let me maybe quickly show that here. Okay, so if I go here, check MongoDB, not Spring Boot, simple MongoDB. So this is the website of MongoDB. Okay, and what you'll see here is a documentation for it. I mean, a lot of things are there, but it is a bit different than what you have seen in a traditional database. In traditional database, there is rows and columns, right? You have, if you remember the interface for this, for our H2 database, it is always represented as rows and columns. So every time you create an entity, it will be created as a row, and then the attributes are actually the values present in the data model. So these are attributes, and for each of these attributes there will be a new, for every new entry there will be a row created. So that is more of a SQL in nature. Okay, but when we interact with a different kind of database called as MongoDB, so MongoDB is also contextually is still the same. That is, you will have a group of entities, and then each entity will have set of properties. Okay, but it is more or less expressed differently. It's not expressed as an SQL or rows and columns. It is expressed as a collection. What we call it as a collection entity, and it is very similar to how JSON looks. Okay, so the way JSON looks, it will exactly be very similar to that. So you may have already seen that when you publish a request to create an entity, we send a JSON, right? When we receive a response, we also receive it as a JSON. And the beauty of MongoDB is that it also expresses or stores the information in JSON format only. So it is very similar to how JSON looks like. It's called as NoSQL database. Okay, so let me go give you a small definition of NoSQL also. NoSQL versus SQL. Okay, so SQL are relational database. So H2 database, MySQL, Postgres, they all are SQL or relational database. And MongoDB and all, and then also there are different kinds of databases. So MongoDB is one, Cassandra is another one, Redis is another one. So different kind of databases available, and they all fall into a category called as NoSQL. Okay, that means it doesn't fall under the traditional database category, which is SQL. Okay, so examples of SQL databases are what? MySQL, Postgres, Oracle. I think there are a few more. They all are called as SQL databases. And how you would know SQL database, how you will find out that whether it's an SQL database, it will always have rows and columns. Okay, what is NoSQL? NoSQL, example of NoSQL databases are MongoDB, Cassandra, Redis, and the way they work is different because they do not store the data in a row and column format. Rather, they store it in a document format, basically. So each document will have certain set of attributes available there. And there is different use case for different databases, like why to use MongoDB, when to use MySQL, when to use Redis, when to use Cassandra. And so there are different use cases for it. MongoDB is very generic. So MongoDB is a NoSQL, but it also has very lot of SQL specific functionalities and features. But we'll not go into details of the advantages of MongoDB and where we go and use it. It's understand it as a very modern database, very fast database, uh, and you can really have find a use case of MongoDB in nearly all your different applications. Different use cases are possible. Different places you can use MongoDB very easily. Okay, so that is what basically what we will also do. So modern, in terms of implementing a modern database with our APIs, is what we wanted to learn, and we have chosen MongoDB, which we will use to integrate it with our Spring Boot API. So the idea is that all the application and everything, okay, this one or any application for that matter. We have three APIs we have. So for three APIs, we will all the information from these APIs will go into the MongoDB database. Okay. Okay. So this is basically what we are looking today. Okay. Uh, Now let me show you what exactly you need to do. So we'll go step by step. Okay. Right now things are getting saved where in H2 database. So let's see how that looks like. Okay. So if I go and run, let me start with my, let's say, doctor app. I can show it from anywhere. So if I open this from doctor app, okay. And if you also notice, every time if you are running this application, let's say, you're always seeing something like this here, which is actually MongoDB. The reason this was coming earlier is because I already, since the very beginning, I added the MongoDB library. Since I've already added the MongoDB library, it was always trying to connect to a MongoDB database, but earlier it wasn't present. And now we will go and add it. But this error was coming since the very beginning. But we were not using it. We were using what? We were using H2 database at the time. And still we are using H2 database. Okay, so if I go and open the, okay, if I come here and I say, okay, I think it's already there. So if I say do like this, I get all this data being created. And if I go and open the database, it's actually on the same place. I simply say console. This is my database. Sorry, what was the password? Demo. So I'll say demo connect. And this is my H2 database, which is very much like a traditional SQL database, very similar to Postgres or um, your MySQL database. Okay, if I simply say run, it shows things in rows and columns. So every time, every entity is a row. These are rows. Okay, and every column is an attribute. So all the attribute which you were seeing here, attributes which you are seeing here is actually like this in the form of columns. So this was a SQL format, but we don't want it now. We want this into a MongoDB format, a document format. Okay, so I'll show you an example of it. So if I go you and open my Atlas MongoDB, so I go and open, so I already have created a MongoDB instance. So MongoDB provides us this online tool called as Atlas. Okay, and this Atlas is a free tool for learning and all, for playing around. Okay, so you have to enroll for it. So you go and sign up, create an account, try free, create an account, and then you can actually use the Atlas instance. Okay, so let me quickly show that to you. Okay, so I mean, you will have to do few things here. It will ask you to create a cluster. So you go and create a cluster. okay, and you feel free of these details, click AWS, click any of these, select some few things here and click on create cluster. Okay, so when you create cluster, it will create, so click on the shared, let me see, shared is free, okay, you see free, so if always click on shared, then AWS, and then select any of these regions, and then click on create cluster. So when you create cluster, it will create a new machine, a new cluster for you. Then inside that cluster, you will have to create some database, okay, some project. So basically, there will be some project which you will have to create. Okay, so I've created this project, Yantra Cloud app or something like that. You can create any of these. You can give any name. So I have one project which is this one, and inside this project, I will have my databases which I can create, which I can have. Okay, it will showing few things here, but then I will click on browse collections, and in the collections I can see my databases. Okay, so you see I already have database created here. So I have this Doctor Everywhere app, and inside this I have three tables. Understand these as tables, but in MongoDB terminology we do not call these as tables, we call them as collections. So I have three collections, and then we inside these collections I have three indexes. So every entity is called as indexes. Okay, so I have this one index, I have three, I have four, I have basically three instances here, three entries here. Okay, so that all three represents a separate document. Okay, so understand in terms of SQL, what you are seeing here as a table, it looks like this here and we call this as collection. What you are seeing here as an entry or a row is a document, and that's why MongoDB is also called as document DB. Okay, so this is what we have. We have different documents, one document, second document, third document, and each document you will have its rows, its column, and its values. Okay, so what you are seeing as a row now is now you're going to see it like this here. Okay, and this is what basically we want to create. Okay, so let me first go and delete this. I have already done this in a separate branch of my Git repository, but I will show you how I did it. There is nothing much we have to do this, but of course there are a few steps which you need to take to migrate from H2 database to the MongoDB database. Okay, so let's start. Okay, so first thing I need to do is I will have to go to POM, and I don't need JPA. Okay, so if I go here, I don't need this dependency started data JPA. So I will just comment this. I do need MongoDB, so I already have it. If you don't have it, you have to put these statements here. So Spring Boot starter data MongoDB. This is automatically going to add the required functionality to connect to MongoDB. Okay, so you will add this things like this here. Okay, then I think here you can also comment this, because now you don't need H2 database, so you'll comment this part also, and then rest can remain more or less the same. Okay, so this is the first change you have to do. Second change, you go to any of your API. So I go here, patient API, I come here, and I go here to main. By the way, there is nothing in its form file, so no change here because I'm using the multi-module project in Maven, so I don't have to do that. Then I go to my patient. Now in the patient, because I have already removed the dependencies, and now if I go to Maven and refresh, it will start showing me errors. Okay, let's see. If I come here, it will start showing me errors because these things were coming from JPA. These things were coming from JPA library, which is this one. And since I've commented them now, this will give me error, and I also don't need them. Okay, so I will kind of remove it. I remove the entity, I remove the generated type. Okay, now instead of entity, I will use something called as @document, because in MongoDB an entity is represented as a document. So I'll say document, and here I can actually give some name. It will be the name of the table. It can, if I don't give it, then it will take patient as it is, but if I give it, it will take that name. So I'll say patients document. ID, I will use the Spring Framework data annotation. So it will be like this. The ID type of this I will change to string because I don't want a long ID. I want to generate a alphanumeric ID using UUID. So I will provide UUID here, and I think that's it. So this is the first change. Yeah, sorry, second change which you have to do. So first change, remember, it was on pom.xml. Second change I have done in the entity itself. Okay, I will just add a data here also. This is inject. This will inject few of the important getter setters and all. Okay. Next thing I will do is I will go to my uh, interface. Now this interface will also give an error because I'm using JPA, which is Java Persistence API, and I don't need this now because this is used to connect to traditional SQL database, but I don't want to use SQL database. I want to use a NoSQL database called as MongoDB. So that is what I will use here. So instead of doing this, I will remove this. I will use here Mongo repository. Okay, so now this is the third change I have made. So first change was in pom.xml file, second change was in entity, and the third change was in the repository. Okay, and then it will remain as it is. So controller, nothing to change, services, nothing to change. It will remain as it is. Okay, now let's see the fourth change. The fourth change is I need to tell my MongoDB library where to find my database. And for my use case right now, I'm making use of Atlas MongoDB. Okay, so Atlas is a tool which is given to me by MongoDB itself. It's a free tool where I can try and play around, and that is what I've done. I've told you how to get an instance for it. You go online, MongoDB Atlas, then you sign up, then you create cluster, and once you create cluster, you create a project. Once you create a project, you will see this instance, this page, and then here right now I am having one database create here. You will not see anything. You will have nothing here. Okay, so you don't have to go and create database. You can go and create database, but you don't have to because MongoDB adapter here has the feature of automatically creating it for you. So don't have to do it. But how do you go and connect is what is important, right? So you go to overview. Okay, let me go to again, click here, click on connect, and here it is showing me how to connect. So it's showing me connect your application. Okay, if I click on this, it is giving me something called as connection string. So this is basically what I need to connect to my database. Okay, but here there is one important thing, which is the username and password, because I also need authentication, right? So for that you have to go to the user, and you have to create the authentication. So I have created a new user, and the name of this is root. Username is root, and password is for this is also root. So you will have to go here and create a new database user. You give whatever name you want to give. I have used root and root. You can do the same thing if you want. Okay, I'll go back to my database here. So I'll click on connect, and the connect, I'll click on connect your application, and then I have this connection string. Okay, and here I have to replace this with the password, but where would I keep it? Okay, so this, if you see it is closely, this is telling me something. This is telling me about where to find my MongoDB. So MongoDB, this is the URL I have, which is given to me by MongoDB itself, MongoDB cloud setup itself, and then authentication is this. Okay, and database is what I will provide later. So I will just copy this, and I will go to my application.yaml, and here if you see I have a Spring, and then under Spring I have these three things. Okay, H2, data source, and JPA. Okay, now since I'm not using H2 and I'm not using JPA, I will not use them. So I'll comment it out, and rather I will write here data, and I will write here URI, and I paste this string here. Okay, so this is the last and most important change which you will have to do. Okay, I missed one thing. I have to also mention MongoDB because this string represents MongoDB. So I have to say something like this. I have to say data MongoDB, and then UR MongoDB, and then URI, and then I will provide details here. Okay, then last thing is I need to mention the database name. So as I told you, I can go here and create a database directly here. So if I go and click on browse collections, and here I can go and create a database, I can do that, but I will not do it because I want it to be automatically created from here. So I will do what? I will, after this slash, I will put something like this. I'll say doctor everywhere app or everywhere DB, because this is the name of our applications. I'll say Doctor Everywhere DB. This will be my database name, and under this database name, I will have multiple collections. So in MongoDB, collection means table. Okay, so I will have multiple tables within this database of MongoDB, and within each of the database or collection, I will have multiple documents. So each document represents a separate row. Okay, and we'll see how this works. This is the last change I will do, and I think that's it. Okay. Of course, here I have to change it to password. So my password here is root. So I'll use that root here. Okay. Now, if I just go and rerun this, let's see what happens. Okay, it is giving error on the doctor part but I don't have to do. Okay, what did I change? Let me see. Main Java. Okay, but I changed patient, right? Let me see in the patient. Okay, this is fine, this is fine, this is okay. Okay, so let me run this. I was running doctor app. I was supposed to run the patient API application. So I will run the patient API application. Okay, that's where I made the change, and it will just run. Okay, if I go back to my collections again, right now there is no database here. If I just refresh this, let's see if something happens. Collections. Okay, now I have a Doctor Everywhere DB, which I gave earlier, and then I have a collection here. Patients collection here means your database, sorry, your table, and within table I have multiple collections like these. Okay, I have multiple collections, sorry, multiple documents. So these three is what I have automatically created. If you remember, I automatically create them every time the API is created, and that is what it is doing at the moment. Okay, so I have already migrated my patient uh, to MongoDB. Okay, and then I will do the same thing for others. Let me quickly do that. I'll go here, do the same thing here. I go to application. Okay, I will remove the unnecessary things. Okay, I'll copy this and I will go to. Okay, I'll come here and then I will replace the whole thing. Okay, the database remains the same and the table name comes from here. So I will remove this, don't need this, don't need this. Then I don't need these column validations. There are different ways we do it, but not these, because these column annotations are coming from JPA and I'm not using any JPA library. How we do exactly this is something we do later, but for now we do something simple. So we come here and we don't need any of this, so we'll remove this also, and here I will simply say @document, and here I'll give it a name as doctors. Okay, fine. So this is also okay. I will change this to string, and I will come here. This will be my Mongo repository. Fine, remove this. Okay, done. So that's the simplest thing I have to do. I have to make change here, I have to make change here, and I have to make change in the repository. Only three change. And the most important change is in the pom.xml file, which you have already done here. This is only once you have to do. Okay, and now if I run this also, Okay, if I run this also and I refresh this again, browse collections, my doctor's details are also coming here. Okay, so this is also working just fine. Okay, and the same thing I will go and do in the appointments API also quickly. It's not there. Table name I don't want. Generated type I don't want. This I want as a string, and this I want as, sorry, string, and then I want here at the rate document, and I want this to be appointments. Okay, and then I will come here. Okay, I don't need to write these queries. We'll comment these one repository. So you just I'm trying to show this in front is because so that you can follow it. Try to do the same thing at your site also. I think I also supposed to change these things to string. Let me modify a few of these things. So I'll change this to, let's say, I don't need booking time because it's automatically will be there. I'll say string appointment date, and then I will say start date, start time. I'll say end time. Okay, document start time, end time. Let all of them be string, and this will have an impact. Oh, here also I have an error. Quickly solve this also. By the way, I don't really need these things here because these are, I'm using these as a POJO and I'm not really using them for any database entity because these are present under appointments API. So I don't really have to mention any of these things here because I don't have any table. They're not representing table, they're simply representing the POJO. So I will remove them, and I will also do not have to add any document here because these doesn't represent a data table for appointments API. So I will leave it as it is. Here the same problem. I will remove this. I will remove ID. I don't need ID. String. I'll remove all of that. Okay, rest is fine. I'll go to my repositories. Okay, service. I think I will have some problem. I know. So I will say get. I think date. Then here, let's say get dot get start time, get end time. Okay, so there is this method called is doctor free at this time. The logic for this was written using appointment date and appointment time using SQL types things. Okay, so if you see here, we wrote some queries and all those things. That is not going to work with MongoDB. So for now, I will comment it. So let's say for now, it will only return true every time so that it doesn't block my other things. So I want to check whether patient is there, I want to check whether doctor is there, and then once these all these things are done, then I will simply say book the appointment, and this will always return true, so no problem here. Okay, why there is still an error? Okay, so I will say because this is a string, so now this is also resolved. Okay, I think everything all right. So now if I go and, okay, I don't need this also. And if I say run, okay, so guys, this is called as refactoring. Okay, refactoring means we create something, and while we create something, we make sure it works at that time, whatever we do. Once we make sure that it is working, everything is fine, then we move on to the next steps. That is how we are developing our API. This is called as evolution of the API. Okay, so we are evolving our APIs one step at a time. Previously, we just created one API, doctor API, then we created patient API, then we created appointments API. Then we use H2 database there. Then we simply send the error codes from the controller. Then we created advices, right? We used exception handling and advices. And then we used, then we thought, okay, now it makes sense to connect this to an actual database. And we then created the actual database, which is MongoDB. And now that also works. Okay, so we went ahead and created the MongoDB cluster, and it's now working. Okay, we also added a security layer in patient API. So if you see in the form.xml, I've added a security setup also here, and I actually expect you guys to go and add the same thing in other places where I have the security config, and here I'm saying what is to be permitted, what is not to be permitted, what is to be authenticated with what user. Okay, so we will do something more in this direction later. We will use something called as JWT token, and not the basic authentication authorizations. We'll do that. But before we do that, I expect you guys to implement the same thing on all other APIs also. Okay, for you to learn how really it works. Okay, fine. So this is how we evolve our API. So this is the second. This is another way of evolving it, because today's session is about how we connect these APIs to the actual backend database system. Okay, that is what basically we are doing. So now let's see if this also works. So now I have all three APIs working. Let's see. So if I go here, I will say localhost 8083. It is working. I go here 8082. It also works. And if I let me close this, and this is 8081. So I'll say 8081 appointment. 8082, I think this one, so I'll move it here, and 8083 patient. So I have all three up and running here. Let's see its effects. So if I go to post, I click on try it out. I say ID, I'll remain as it is. Name, I say a new patient, let's say, is want to register, right? So I say Anil, age is 45, email is anil@anil.com, and phone is whatever, condition is, let's say, spine, whatever. Click on execute. Oh, so now this is going to ask the username and password, and that is what I was showing you earlier. So if I go to security config, my username password is Akash and Akash, right? So I simply say Akash and Akash and click on sign in, and this will create the details, right? So it has added the data into database, but which database, right? So here the database we are using is MongoDB. So I can go and validate it there. I go here, I click on patients, and I will get to see the thing here. Okay, so I have Anil 45, Anil spine, all these details are coming here. Okay, same thing goes with my doctor API. So I go to doctor, post it, try it out. I'll say name. Okay, I'll say name as what name to put here? Let's say Mukesh. Let's say Dr. Mukesh, and I'll say restaurant ID is 3456778. Whatever qualification is MBBS. Specialization is, let's say, what specialization can he has? Ortho, and experience, let's say, is 23 years. Email ID is .com. Clinic name is Apollo Hospital. Can do home visit, yes. Okay, is doctor available? True. Click on execute, and it will create the entity, and I can go and check it here also. So if I go to my database, click on doctors, and the same data is now available here. Okay, there is in fact a problem here. In this, ID is coming as string. Here ID is coming at bit weird, object ID of some sort. So this is a problem. Okay, because I don't want these weird IDs present here. I want a proper IDs, and that we'll see, because earlier in JPA We were using what? We were using auto-generated feature. Here also we can have something similar, but we will not use that feature. We'll use our own defined IDs called a UUID, okay, and that we will use here. So let's see. Before that, I will go to my appointments API and I go to appointments. And if you remember, appointment API, it checks first whether the patient and doctor is available or not. If not, then it won't book it. So instead, I come here, I'll say book it on today's date, which is 12th March. Okay. And then start time is, let's say, 0700 p.m. till 0800 p.m. And patient email, let's say I say akash@akash.com, and doctor email, let's say do something weird. Then let's see if the R validation works. If I click on execute, our validation is working. Doctor with email as is does not exist. Why? Because it has made a query to doctors, and here it could not find anything with the value as this. So it could not find anything with this value. Okay, so that's why it has given me this error. Now if I say some other, let's say the recent one which I created, I just created this one, right? So if I use this now, instead of this, now if I say something like this, okay, and click on execute, it will go and check first whether the patient is there, then it will check whether a doctor is there, and both of them, if there, it will create the entity, but it's not creating it. I don't know why. Let's see. There is a problem. It is looks like bit blocked. Oh, where is my appointments table? Let's see. I only have, oh, okay, I think I made a mistake. So if I go back here in the appointment API, I think I forgot to add my important thing here called as application YAML. So I did not, in the application YAML, I did not put the MongoDB URL, and that's where it wasn't working. So I will remove this. So files will remain as it is, JPA and all these things I will remove. I don't need Spring, I need data. Fine. So now I have to restart this. I'll restart it. It runs, and now if I go here, run it again, execute, it works. So now if I go back and if I refresh this, how can I quickly refresh this? Let's just do it from here. Okay, so once I refresh this, I get to see 3 collections here. I click on appointments and I will have my detail present here. Okay, so this also now is working. Last thing which I would do is to make sure this string doesn't come like this. I want this to be in a better coming as a better a meaningful ID which is unique. Okay, so what I will do for this is I will add a small method called as UUID, generate UUID. Okay, and I will add that in, I will have to go and add that in all of my, all the places where the ID is being generated. So let me do it in the patient first. So if I go into my patient, sorry, in my sorry, okay, here. Okay, I don't want these things to be created again and again and again. Okay, so because it already has now come into the system, so I will not create them again. Or maybe let it be like this for now, and I will just go and add that method here. So I'll say public, and I will say string, and then I will say generate UUID. Okay, and then I will say UUID. This is a Java util coming from Java util library, and I'll say UUID dot generate, or let's say random UUID. This gives me random UUID, and I will just return this simply saying UUID dot to string, and this will return me the string of it. Okay, and I will just call this where I am creating, I'm creating this in the post here, right? So I'll say patient dot set ID, and I will just simply do this. And now whatever entity I create, okay, whatever entity I create, so I will say patient API rerun. And from now onwards, whatever I create, it will actually give a proper ID to it. Okay, so I come here, patient post, and here if I say Anil, now the new patient I want to add, let's say Ashwini. Okay, Ashwini at the rate Ashwini. Okay, execute. This has created, and now if you see, the ID is proper. A proper unique UUID is being generated, and this is what also you will go and see in the patients list here. Okay, now you go back, and this is what you see. Okay, fine. So this is what basically is the functionality of MongoDB. There is more to it, which we'll see. I mean, you will have to implement methods to really make it work. Um, so this is what I really, guys, I have to talk about today. Okay, guys, can you please give me a minute?